Hi there, my name is Sebastian. I'm the founder of Rollout Democracy, a consulting company specialized in political technology. And today with me is Lib Dem strategist and digital expert Mark Pack.
Hi.
Welcome, Mark.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us in our round of interviews. I wanted to talk about both politics, especially in the UK. We are in London at the moment, but also about technology and all the exciting things that are taking place. But let's start with UK politics. It's been more than a month since the last general election. What are the main lessons learned that political parties and the country in general can take from it?
I mean, a lot of people, I think, when talking about this election we've just had in Britain, talk about it as if it was somehow almost unprecedented and, completely unexpected. I think the unexpected bit is certainly true. People were expecting everyone, including even Jeremy Corbyn on election night, the Labour leader on election night, were expecting the Tories to win with a comfortable majority. So that bit was surprising. But the basic fundamentals of the party that was ahead in the polls before the election campaign began was also the party that won the most votes and the most seats on polling day. So there was an upset, but it wasn't as big an upset as I think sometimes people make out. And the thing that is very clear from the sort of the tracking research during the election is what really did for the Tories was a disastrously inept policy launch with their manifesto. In Britain, the general election manifestos are quite a big deal. They get quite a lot of attention from the media. They're a central part of the election campaign. A lot of the public actually never go near reading a manifesto, but they pick up the media coverage around the manifesto, and that was just done disastrously badly. So it was, in my day job, I work in sort of PR, so you might expect me to say this, but it was a classic example of how if you don't plan your big media event well, it goes horribly wrong.
No, I mean, that's a great insight. I've heard many experts saying that probably the Labour Party was also able to capture the mood of the country, anti-austerity, and a little bit like against the establishment. In your view, Lib Dems, were they on the message? Were they able to capture that mood of the country?
I think the big failure, and I say this with hindsight, I think it's much easier to see after the event, but the big failure of the Liberal Democrat campaign message was we talked a lot about Europe, but we talked about process rather than outcome. So we talked about how we wanted a further referendum on the terms of the Brexit deal. And actually, for example, I found when talking to people on the doorstep canvassing, that idea that, look, there's huge unknowns in what will be in the deal, somebody's got to decide in the end if the deal's a good thing or not, that should be the public, that worked okay as a message. But the problem was that's talking about political insidery processy stuff, and we didn't do enough talking about what we want for the future, the vision of Britain that we hold. And as you say, what Labour I think tapped into quite successfully was a sense of even people who think that Labour were wrong in the last 5 or 10 years, but do feel like, look, after all that pain, even if they feel it was worth it, at some point there should be some gain for that. And the Conservatives really didn't have a positive vision in that sense. The Lib Dem vision was one about process rather than really being a vision that people could respond to. And so Labour, to their credit, tapped into that very effectively.
Okay. This year we've seen the general, or in a little bit more than a year, we've seen the outcome of the referendum and also the general election. So what do you expect in the next year, in the next political season?
I have no idea. I think that's the only sensible conclusion one can make, particularly because I think Theresa May, the Prime Minister, she's in a very weak position. But actually, sometimes people in very weak positions hang on for a long time because the question is who is actually going to push her out of office. There's a long tradition in British politics that whoever tries to oust a leader of their party ends up not being the next leader themselves. So there's something that holds back all of her rivals. And indeed for the Conservative Party as a whole, there is a clear incentive. They are actually in power at the moment. They are in a bit of a mess, so why do anything that would risk triggering an election? So you can see how the Conservative Party might actually hang on in power, I think, for quite a long time. Just as a quick aside, it's something that's very notable when you look at long periods of power in office at parties around the world. takes, for example, the Liberals in Australia or the Conservatives in Canada, both long terms of office that come to an end. But both of those often involve significant periods of time when the ruling party was either a minority or only had a small majority. So this idea that I think because you're a minority government, you're bound to have only a short shelf life. Who knows, in 15 years' time, this might be the precursor to another series of multiple Conservative election wins. I hope not, but who knows?
No, exactly. I mean, in the current political landscape, situations are so volatile that, like you said, even an strategist and an expert like you, it's very easy. It's very difficult to forecast that. Let's move on now to our favorite subject, which is technology and political campaign technology. We've just seen a shake-up within the Liberal Democrats Party with the new leader, Vince Cable. What is, in your opinion, the direction that the party is going to take technology-wise?
I think it's interesting having Vince as the leader of the party now, because although I think he won't mind me saying he's of an older generation, and therefore you wouldn't expect him necessarily to be a digital native, I found he's got a pretty savvy understanding of what digital can do in politics. I think that partly comes from his sort of lifelong passion in science and engineering. It was something he was very keen on prioritising when he was a minister in government before. And I think that, you know, if you are a believer in, you know, and keen about and interested in science and engineering, that very naturally goes over to an understanding of how digital as well is a way in which technology and invention and creativity can change the world and change the world in a better way. And so I think Vince has got a good understanding in that sense of how important the changes that digital are bringing about are, and the way in which political parties, especially smaller political parties, can use that to build a broader audience. So for the Liberal Democrats, you know, back in the middle of the last century, we sort of effectively invented for British politics the idea of regular community political newsletters delivered outside of election time. And the reason we invented that was because of a need to get our story over to people when the main media weren't really paying as much attention. And you can see how the ethos behind that sort of focused newsletter translates very easily over now to believing that digital channels are really important.
Okay. Which takes us to the next question. The next question that in the past we've chatted about it, and you've always said that the party shouldn't be faced with the binary choice of investing in digital and investing in grassroots, leaflets, door-to-door canvassing. But the balance is very hard to maintain. Where should the balance lean towards? More digital, grassroots for the Lib Dems and more specifically, but also in general?
I guess I view it's a bit like saying, well, how many vowels should we have in our next press release and how many consonants should we have in our next press release? And of course, that's not... You can count up the vowels and consonants if you really want, and I guess if you've got all one or none of the other, you've probably not got a press release that's readable, but that's not really the right way of looking at it. And so similarly with grassroots campaigning and with digital campaigning, what's the most effective digital channel? Very often it's email, because email allows you to push a message at people and it allows you to have a really good understanding of what's working and what's not working. Okay, next question, what's the best way of getting people's email addresses? It's asking people on the doorstep with grassroots campaigning. So I think the two are really closely entwined. But what is a crucial element, and especially in Britain with the electoral system that we have, with sort of first past the post electoral system used for Westminster general elections and lots of other elections, is that ability to target your activity really tightly on quite small geographic areas. Because if you've got maybe a high street, with one side of the high street is an ward that you're targeting, the other side of the high street is a seat that's completely safe for another party, quite literally, which side of the street a voter is in makes a mammoth difference to how much effort is worth putting in targeting them. And one of the things I think we've seen in the last few years, particularly with the ability to target digital ads by very tight geolocation, is there's now much more ability to integrate digital activity with that very tightly targeted geographic focus that our voting system forces on parties.
Okay. That was the for someone who knows the Lib Dems from inside. I completely agree, and I think parties.
You're a very wise man, then.
So thank you for that insight. One of the most interesting trends that we've seen so far are the incredible surge in membership with the Lib Dems, especially from young voters who were fed up with the result of the referendum. And what is the best channel to communicate with those young, highly engaged voters or members that you've just had?
Well, this is certainly, I think, where digital is really important, both in terms of email especially, because that's the thing that, the party has the email address for nearly every member, not quite every member, but nearly every member, and that gives an ability to push messages out to people regularly at a much cheaper level than old school postage, etc. But I think what is also an important part of that is, in a way, the background noise that people consume a lot of their news through, for example, their Facebook news feed. They might click through and read stories on the BBC or the Guardian or the Daily Mail or whatever, but the Facebook news feed is a large part of their interface with the news in that sense. And, frustratingly, but I guess understandably, given the number of MPs the Dems have, we don't get huge amounts of media coverage. So making sure we're appearing in the Facebook newsfeed, in the Twitter timeline, on people's sort of smartphone and laptop screens reasonably regularly through our own channels as well, I think gives people therefore much more of a sense of what the party's about, that we are achieving things, that we are doing things, and therefore hopefully that we are a good cause to carry on supporting.
One of the main tools that canvassers and volunteers at Lib Dems have are, of course, your YouTube videos, your tutorials about why it is important and how to do it. But that, of course, has an important human component, which is yourself making sure that you post regularly and good content. But beyond that, is there, or have you seen, I'm pretty sure you have you seen good developments technology-wise in terms of what we can give to grassroots and volunteers to perform their job?
I think we might be just about to be on the cusp of some quite exciting developments and quite useful developments, because one of the big challenges in politics is this question of scale. So if, let's say, in Britain you want to become a member of parliament, your constituency will typically have something like 80,000 electors. So if you just think even if you maybe spend 5 minutes talking to a voter, and so in an hour you get through 12 voters, maybe 10 voters with a little bit of travel time. If you do 10 hours a day of trying to speak to voters, that gives you 100 voters a day, 700 voters a week, just under 3,000 voters a month. To get around all 80,000, that takes a heck of a long time, let alone doing anything else. So there's a real challenge of how do you, as one candidate, and in the end, yes, you can have helpers and you can have supporters, but you are still the candidate. How can the candidate engage with as many voters as possible? And doing that at scale is really difficult. And I think that's why in the sort of early years of the internet, a lot of the hopes of sort of technical enthusiasts about how technology would change politics wasn't realised, because it was often about, there are these great ways you can engage one-on-one with people over the other side of the world or whatever. Well, great, useful for all sorts of things, but for politicians and for voters, those don't tackle the issues of scale. But now I think with things like bots, with AI, with the ability to run communities online, we're seeing more and more opportunities to do things in a way where the candidate or the politician can engage with lots of voters, but the voters can also in turn feel that it's a more personal experience than simply them being one in a large crowd. And we've seen a few little signs of that. I guess the French election recently, and indeed the Indian election, where holograms were used so that a candidate could sort of literally be projected into other locations, so more people could feel they were at a speech being given by the candidate. That's perhaps at the slightly cheesier end of the technology. At the more mundane, maybe, but probably very important end, the AI-powered bots can give people a sense of, yes, they know that they're engaging with technology, but also a sense of they're engaging in an individual way, when from the point of view of the party, they're able to do it at scale.
We've seen more recently, we will see actually in German elections, we will see those machines to train canvassers, especially those who are gonna face the first time a voter at the doorstep. Do you see that type of technology being applied in the UK, where you are more experienced? at door canvassing or in the rest of Europe?
I love the CDU canvassing simulator that you introduced me to. If anyone's not seen it, not now, but after we finish this video, if you go and Google CDU canvassing simulator, it's fantastic. This little virtual reality experience one of the German parties has built. I think that's probably the level at which the technology is still a little bit too difficult and is a little bit too expensive. But the speed with which VR is developing, I would be surprised if in, say, 5 or 10 years' time, it wasn't the norm that, if you have never gone canvassing, you can maybe do a little VR game first to find out what canvassing is like. If you've never given a political speech at a podium before, even Barack Obama at one point in his life had never given a speech at a podium before, Again, a VR experience that gives you a bit of sense of what's there. There's a lovely example of this at Liberal Democrat conference. Quite often you see first-time speakers who have never spoken at a conference before, not quite ending their speech at the right time when their time runs out. And that's because it's quite easy to lose sight of where the lights are that tell you when you're out of time, when there's everything else in front of you. So you can imagine a little 1-minute VR tour of what it's like standing at the podium at conference, pointing out where the lights are, where you should look, etc. That would be really useful. Now, I think at the moment that would be quite hard to do, but certainly within 5 years, I would be surprised if it wasn't something that you could easily shoot on a camera like the camera that we're using for this Facebook Live, and have it very quickly turned around into something loads of people could use.
So in conclusion, with VR and technology, we can unleash the Obama that each
the inner
of us
Obama in each of us,
Obama.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Mark.
Thank you for watching.
We'll set you free now. We hope you had a great holidays. If you are lucky enough to have holidays.
Thank you.
And for the rest of our audience, just saying that we'll post this on our newsletter with subtitles and with the highlights. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you for watching.